Observation. After a certain time in the work, a person begins to recognize one or two eyes in themselves. They will, of course, be unable to do so if they still remain wholly under the influence of imaginary I, for in that case they will have the illusion that they are one I, one solid person and one permanent ego. This will prevent them from even beginning to discover eyes in themselves. However, the work teaches that our personality is made up of a large number of egos, all of which call themselves I and take charge of us at different times. Hence our life is in the hands of a great many people unknown to us, who live in and on us, some of whom may be desirable, but many undesirable. Ordinarily we do not see these people, mistaking them for ourselves, which is a curious illusion if you think about it. One should be constantly reflecting upon this and noticing how it works. Then we might begin to see into the illusion, how clever it is and yet how simple. Some egos in us are very dangerous, and should never be allowed either to speak through us, nor to call themselves I. However, this is easy to say, but very difficult to do. Some are dangerous in one way, others in another way. So let's take suspicious eyes as an extreme example. These eyes are amongst the most calamitous and possess the extraordinary power of binding someone to their influence. Their action lies in transforming things, or rather connecting them in some obscure way. Their representation in the intellectual center is very subtle, where they transpose facts to fit with their central theory, with the nature of suspicion. They alter the arrangement of things in a memory and in thought, so that everything seems to corroborate and confirm everything else. In this way, they build up an organized mental system, composed not of truth, but of falsehood. In the emotional center they arouse their own peculiar feelings, which are distinct from jealousy or envy, revenge and hatred, then give a curious excitement, as do all destructive emotions. The action of suspicious eyes is such that they are able, in a short time, to spread like a ferment in all directions within us, then set or fix the materials of the mind and emotions as if they were coagulated. They also act on our moving center, giving rise to stealthiness, odd silences of body movement and so on. Suspicion takes everything on the lowest plane, and is therefore closely connected with the sin against the Holy Ghost mentioned in the Gospels, which refers to seeing the worst side of everything and everyone, from the environment of level 96 and level 192. Suspicious eyes are fond of whispered conversations and subterfuge if you notice them in action. The idea of this work is to make one big observing eye that stands outside of personality, something that takes screenshots of all eyes in our personality. The more images we capture, the stronger will observing eye become, and the more chances that we have of emerging into a new life. One liberated from the compulsion and habits of our old life. However, apart from the fact that it is difficult to capture any images at all, at least to begin with, it becomes clearer later on, that some eyes are exceptionally difficult to photograph. This is because of their hypnotic power over us. Remember that all eyes are specialized, subject matter experts of different types. One is fond of this, another of that. One likes to say or do this, another to say or do that, and so on. Some of these eyes attract us more strongly than others do, particularly ones that we feel add to our stature, make us feel empowered or justified, hence their inner hypnotizing power is greater because they vindicate us and support a narrative. This applies particularly to suspicious eyes that are present in everyone, and might play only a minor role, or assume far greater proportions. They are among the most subjective of all eyes, and so can eventually employ the reasoning power of our formatory center for their own purpose. So that an individual begins to live in some other inner world of their own invention, paranoid schizophrenia, which is distinct from the objective or real situation around them. Every eye makes, as it were, a little momentary world into which we pass when we identify with it, but suspicious eyes, when consented to and nourished by our will, invade all that inner life, and organize it into another and permanent hell world. The chaos magic of level 192, where anything we imagine is terraformed for us. The power of observing eye not to identify with what it observes varies with the kind of eye it observes. The hypnotizing power of suspicious eyes, like that of jealous, vengeful eyes or envying eyes, is so strong that our independent power of observing eye is often overwhelmed. Observing eye identifies with what it observes, which would not be so easy if observing eye had strong thoughts about the work, some definite work eye supporting it, and some strong feelings. However, when people take hold of this work and the whole idea of esotericism loosely, in some trivial way, and in so doing, place minuscule value on it, then observing eye is very weak, unsupported, and easily swamped. Like some small vessel without keel, rudder, sail, compass, or master. A weak observing eye is due to lack of seeing what work is about, and if we do not see what the work is about, it means we do not try to think about it. Esotericism throughout the ages is something substantive, and we fail to take hold of it with little trivial eyes. Probably best not even to attempt to do so in this case. One point worth noting about this extreme example of suspicious eyes is the less that we realize our own deceitfulness, the more will we tend to be suspicious of others. The key is to see that they are eyes formed through long habit and association that we can separate from, and not go with, not believe in, or not consent to. Naturally, if we consent to every eye of the moment in ourselves, then we are not working, and do not understand what work on oneself truly means. Work on ourselves means to evolve into a new way of living consciously inside ourselves instead of mechanically. It means to work against our mechanical ways of reacting to everything and so on. Work on oneself means just that, work on yourself. This begins when we observe ourselves and begin to see different eyes in us that have preyed on us and enslaved us all of our lives. However, this is all impossible if we imagine that we are one person. Another set of eyes is based on slander. Their activity, and in fact the delight of these eyes, lies in various forms of slandering, of vilifying or twisting and manipulating the narrative. This constitutes in the work one bad form of wrong talking in general. Their strength varies in different people, but when they are marked, a person must struggle to see them and separate from them with all available willingness, mindfulness, and desire. They are very dangerous eyes, because they act against the person themselves eventually, turning on us and slandering our name so as to drag us down internally, thereby preventing us from understanding. Slandering everything we try to do, even quite sincerely. Remember that there is a reason why the devil was called the slanderer in the Gospels. Try to observe when you are slandering, both in your mind and verbalizing it, then notice and remember it, trying to see that it is certain eyes in you that are doing it, then notice what they wish to say and feel pleasure in, how they come to wake up in you and become active, and so on. Eyes that belong to the domain of suspicion, slander, hatred, revenge, envy, jealousy, and so on, must be struggled with to the very end of one's life. We never stop working to subjugate them. For to realize that we need not go with these various habitual eyes, is the dawn of a new life. The beginning of understanding what personal work really means. Because nothing sentimental or foolish is implied here, this dawn does not come as long as we take ourselves as one, and continue to live under the hypnotic power of imaginary eye, which is a cloak for all the different eyes in us, worn by each in turn as Joseph's technicolored dream coat. Remember too that the secret lies in seeing these eyes as not you, or rather as not I. If we take them as I, then nothing can be done, as we are standing on the plank that we are also trying to lift, and that is impossible because we are standing in our own way. Let's look now at different kinds of eyes, some of which may also be very important. Previously we examined worry and worrying eyes, which form a strong group in most people. Their action is interesting to observe as their sole objective is to upset us and make us depressed, in other words stressed out. They lead to nothing else and are quite useless, as are so many eyes in us. But we have to notice this for ourselves, through direct and sustained self-observation, what they do and say, and what their main objective might be. Worry eyes act in two main ways. We all have our worrying eyes, about each other, about business, about money, about our state of health, family, and so on. And we also have to meet other people's worrying eyes too. Try to see even one worrying eye distinctly in yourself, study it, see how it only loves to exhaust you, draining all of your will, and yet leading you nowhere, then you will observe others too. Notice too how some of our worrying eyes connect themselves with the work. We begin to fret about the work in one way or another, whether we are working enough and so on. They are like flies and settle on anything because they are all small eyes, living in small parts of centers. They cease to be relevant when we get into directed attention. We can imagine that worrying eyes have a kind of overseer, who looks out for jobs to give them. If you cannot see your own worrying eyes, notice those in other people. How as soon as one drama is over, They almost arrange to have something else to worry about. These eyes disperse force and exhaust people, causing physical as well as mental illness. They are, so to speak, rampant in Western society. Let's now take eyes that like to complicate and muddle things. They form a considerable group of somewhat varying eyes whose objective is not to help, but to hinder, and make everything extraordinarily difficult. They delight in misunderstanding everything. They delight in calling our attention to something unimportant. They delay us, especially last-minute eyes, as P.D. Uspensky called them. Eyes that come onto the stage just as we have to go somewhere, to catch a train, go to work and so on. Then take two sensational eyes, which is dramatic eyes that love to create a scene, to get excited and which lead even to dramatic hysteria. Their objective is to exaggerate everything, and when they express themselves through our moving center, they like to scream and make violent jerky movements. In the intellectual center they shout generic sentences, such as, "I can't stand this any longer," or "this is too much." They produce frantic states and panic, which again only exhaust and deplete our nervous system. They are enemies of our own creation, and people like them a great deal, even feeding off those states created in others. We need to realize that a great many eyes, in fact most of them, are working against us, and in so doing, wish to destroy things in various ways, openly or more deceptively. Which is precisely why we have to be awake and alert to the danger and extreme prejudice that we pose to ourselves. Negative eyes are often exceptionally subtle and dangerous. We can say that negative eyes form a very great part of our inner life, and that they always exhaust our life force, weakening us both for life and for the work. There is only one thing that can fight for us here, and that is this work on self, but it will fight for us only in proportion to our valuation of it. Negative eyes are created by life, as are other eyes, and life as third force keeps them alive. This work is contra to third force, that weakens all eyes formed through life, save those that can understand esoteric ideas, those that begin to understand that there is another way of living, a different way of thinking or valuing, feeling and acting. That wish to reinterpret everything that happens to us, in terms of another set of ideas. Again, notice eyes that like to be ill and attract illness. The habit of illness can be formed early on, and that means that a group of eyes form themselves that wish to occupy the stage whenever possible. They have attention deficit and wish to make you ill, so they revel in that state. It used to be taught by Gurdjieff that 80% of our illnesses have a psychological cause of this kind, and are therefore psychosomatic, and due to eyes, just as in the same way, if you form the habit of taking some substance, developing a dependency upon it, then the eyes formed and nourished by that substance will seek to dominate and destroy you. Look for different kinds of eyes, and try to observe them practically. All eyes are specialized. More or less similar eyes form groups, and these may form personalities. For example, a doctor's medical eyes will be varied, but form a personality within a more everyday persona, one that could be ascribed as their bedside manner. An individual's social eyes will do the same thing, their family eyes another. There are often useful eyes in us that were formed early on, and which we do not nourish during our adult life. This is a grave mistake, as people often drop their best eyes in this way fairly early on. They get overwhelmed by life and its exigencies, then give in and make no effort to further build upon what they have already gained. Then it is like a garden becoming overgrown with weeds, with useless, impoverished or negative eyes. Everything in nature has to fight to make effort. Animals and plants cannot, as far as we know, make psychological effort, as they possess firstly an instinctive mind, and then secondly an emotional mind. However, we know that we can, as we evolve with a formatory apparatus or intellect. All of this work is effort, not effort such as lifting a weight or walking to work, but psychological effort on that inner world called oneself. We have specialized eyes formed by previous interests, education, and the influence of our peers. One eye is fond of poetry, another of mathematics, another of music, another of writing, another of reading, another of running or dancing, and so on. When our first education ends, very often these eyes fade and become weak, because they are no longer nourished through attention. We make no effort to sustain them. To direct the conscious light of our attention to anything requires effort. This is psychological effort. Attention, will and consciousness are very closely connected. Once we have embarked upon our second education, this work, We should all know to some extent when we can exert effort with regard to useful eyes. Then if you notice that you do not, try to observe what eyes prevent you from doing so. This is seeing second force within you, the force of resistance to effort. When we leave good and useful eyes unvisited too long, they lose heart as it were. It is much the same inside as outside. What is being said here is that with regard to different eyes in oneself, one should also work on good eyes. It is not simply a question of working on bad eyes. The work, like everything else, has two sides, and walks on two legs. When you observe genuinely good and useful eyes that want to know, to be taught more, then do not neglect them. This applies to work eyes. You cannot work on bad eyes, if you neglect work eyes, if you do not keep them alive through thought, feeling and effort. It is necessary to strengthen work eyes, not only by remembering what we are doing, but by re-understanding the esoteric ideas of this work again and again. Agreeing to something because you're motivated to do so and understanding it are two different things. We are constantly relearning and re-seeing the meaning of the work until it forms our sky. This strengthens the side of observing eye, and makes it possible for it to remain outside and resist the influence of what it observes. All new life and inner vigor form around observing eye, which leads finally up to real eye. Once this is reached, then this world, which is really of course a school, has fulfilled its task, and we have completed our work with regard to it. The Sunakata Sutta states that, we discern that birth is ended, the holy life fulfilled, the task is done. However, this goal is very far from us all at present. How can we then make use of the observations that we have made on ourselves? We need to realize that we can do nothing with regard to changing ourselves, unless we observe what lies within first. Self-observation must precede all change of oneself. We cannot change what we fail to observe, because observing a thing in ourselves is to know it. Thus begins self-knowledge, and the first step toward self-knowledge is to see that you are not one. If you know nothing of yourself and your many eyes, then how can you possibly change yourself? You have to see what is meant clearly and understand it. Here are some things worth reflecting upon at this stage. The observations that we have made help us to have aim. They give us force to go on working. Our observations begin to create work memory. They cause an alarm bell to ring next time the event happens. We can observe the same thing more deeply the next time it occurs. This increases self-consciousness. Your self-observation collects eyes around observing eye. This will be a step towards inner separation, which is something to be discussed further. Our observations will make us less mechanical when something recurs. And finally, our observations help us to see our being.